room together, and you know, we've come a long way. The world of Hadoop and what's going on here at Hortonworks is that we are in a completely different world than what we were a year ago. And so, you know, I'm really looking forward to Sean's presentation today, and kind of excited to hear about kind of, you know, what's happened in the last year, and kind of more importantly where we're going, and really what stands for Hadoop in 2014. So with that, I'll just invite Sean. I mean, he's got all the great content. He's the money here, right? So go ahead, Sean.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on today's webinar. As Jim outlined, we're going to take a, you know, sort of a step back, reflect a little bit on, you know, some of the accomplishments made in 2013 as context, actually, for where things are headed in 2014. And so, from an agenda perspective, you know, I really want to make sure I just level set for those who might be new to either Hortonworks or the Apache Hadoop ecosystem, just spend a little time setting context there. But really the meat of the webinar is going to be focused on Hadoop's role in modern data architectures and in the data center, and where and how it integrates with many of the tools and technologies you may already have. What's been the, you know, the adoption path, the sort of the Hadoop journey that, you know, end users of Hadoop have been going on. And so there's a theme of apps to a shared data lake notion that I'm going to walk through. It's very rinse and repeat type of adoption path that we're seeing. It's pretty exciting to see the market mature. And then I'm going to spend time on the enterprise Hadoop technology directions, hit some of the key areas that I think are pivot off of some of the success in 2013 are going to be important as we move forward. So for those who are less familiar with Hortonworks, we were founded in July 2011 with 25 or so of the engineers and architects who were at Yahoo working on Hadoop and operating Hadoop at scale across massive clusters. Since then, we've actually grown over 10x, so we're about 300 employees and counting, with you know, 250 plus customers. So it's been an exciting ride since the beginning, and it's really, this Hadoop market is only accelerating, which is pretty key. Our focus is really on enabling an enterprise Hadoop platform to be built out and to power modern data architectures, and I'll cover a little bit of that. But really the way we approach the market is we do all our innovation in open source projects, so we drive our innovation in the open. We take our shared test harnesses as well as our expertise to really wring out the technology so they're ready for mainstream enterprises, so apply a lot of rigor to the process. And then really from a, since Hadoop is going to be a key technology but not the only technology, making sure it deeply integrates with other data systems, tools, and technologies, so you maximize your investment in other data center technologies as you're using those with Hadoop. So that sort of paints the picture. The open leadership point for those who are less familiar with the Apache Software Foundation, I just want to make sure I give the Apache Software Foundation a plug because they play a key role in this. They are a nonprofit charitable organization, and for those of you who are familiar with the Apache web server or Apache Tomcat, they've played host to wildly successful open source projects for the better part of 15 plus years. Apache Hadoop happens to be one of these successful open source projects that is really transforming how we look at managing data at scale. But the Apache Hadoop project is just one of many Hadoop-related projects that all have their own project management committee members. They're the ones who are tasked with leading the community, growing the community, recruiting new members and contributors, helping to incubate new technologies in open source projects. So really keeping the vibrancy going. The committers are really the engineers who are or the gatekeepers, if you will. They're writing the code, they're checking it in the source repository, and they're engaging with a broader community of contributors who will submit in patches or features or what have you, and really they're the ones who make sure it gets escorted in the projects in a cohesive way. And then each project has their own release cycle. Apache prides itself on, each project growing its own unique community. And so the release managers are tasked with making sure that those projects release on a timely fashion. So there's not an enterprise Hadoop platform that necessarily comes out of this collection. They're sort of, they collaborate as needed, but that gives them the power of driving innovation in a way that's pretty unique. How that relates to enterprises consuming it, at Hortonworks we have a process where we do our work in that upstream community, harden those projects in the open, and then we consume those and make sure we package the versions that are ready for prime time, that work together well. We test it at scale, package and certify it across a wide range of platforms, Windows, Linux, cloud, VM, appliances, etc., and provide a stable, consumable enterprise product that the market can consume. Again, all in an open source license. But when we talk about the Hadoop and the Hadoop ecosystem, we have to make sure that we give props to the Apache Software Foundation for providing strong stewardship so these projects can flourish. So that sets some of the context, all right? Now let's actually get into the meat of the webinar and talk a little bit about how Hadoop's role has evolved over the past couple of years, and its role in how it fits into a modern data architecture has been clear, has really becoming clearer, and how the market in general, it isn't just about the open source projects, it's about a broader ISV and platform technology. A lot of the vendors that are already in the data center have been looking at Hadoop and embracing it over the past couple of years. So, the sentiment in Tony Baer's quote here is, Hadoop is becoming a more normal software market. The vendor ecosystem is gaining critical mass. And so that sort of sets the tone, but sort of why Hadoop, what's its role? We really need to double back to really the problem that it was designed to solve in the first place. And it's really around these new types of data that are available and in increasing volumes that are out there, right? So we hear all the statistics of the digital universe is going from 2.8 zettabytes to 40 zettabytes. Well, what does that mean? If you unpack that, you'll see that 85% of this data growth is driven by these new types of data, whether it's sensor machine data, mobile devices, sentiment, clickstream, geolocation data, etc. And even just the Internet of Things machine data is growing 15x through 2020. If you look at those types of data, you'll realize that they really aren't well suited to fit into traditional relational database model or traditional data systems. Those systems weren't necessarily designed to handle the types and velocity of data that has emerged. So that really has put a lot of pressure on sort of the existing systems, both technically but also economically. Just being able to store those volumes is difficult to do with a cost structure that makes sense. Enter Hadoop, where it's uniquely able to land any and all data types, whether it's social, sentiment data or clickstream data, where you're analyzing website visitors' paths through your website and really trying to optimize offers or increase your transactions, or sensor machine data, on really understanding the patterns that are being emitted from this increasingly Internet of Things and machines and sensors that are out there, both from an operational perspective or otherwise. Increasingly, everybody's mobilely connected, so geographic data is highly relevant to provide added context to a lot of data that you might be collecting. And again, in server logs, a lot of your existing systems may already be capturing context around how your systems are powering applications or what have you, and you're able to farm that information and sort of unlock use cases that previously weren't able to be unlocked. And the point here is, since Hadoop has been designed as a sort of a scale-out commodity hardware-based infrastructure, it's uniquely positioned to ingest and store these varying types of data for virtually unlimited time periods. So week, month, year, decades, or what have you. It's an active archive of information that you're able to store in its original format and continue to derive value out of it, as opposed to locking it away on tape or throwing it away and purging it. Really, Hadoop's value is in around providing a way to harness these new types of data. And if you think of Hadoop as a peer to the existing data systems, a modern data architecture really has emerged. And that enables you to not only deal with your existing sources, but your emerging sources in an architectural approach that's holistic, number one. And number two, you're actually able to use the right tools and technologies for the right workload, right? So you're able to optimize your enterprise data warehouse and focusing on operational and analytic serving of the business, and offload some of the processing of the new data types and aggregating that and beginning to figure out what the insights are that are possible. And in an integrated solution architecture, you can get a real nice virtuous cycle of onboarding these new types of data and joining it up with some of your traditional transactional sources to really get a better idea of the context around what drove some of your transactions in the first place. So again, Hadoop is a peer. It's not a replacement. If you approach it properly, you can actually enable a solid modern data architecture. And so what does this mean really and pragmatically? What we've seen over the past couple of years is, many of the existing data center technologies as well as startups that have emerged to form around providing value, not only around Hadoop as a platform, but also being able to leverage data no matter what data system it may reside in, right? So whether it's your business intelligence tools, SAP Business Objects or Excel, Tableau or what have you, being able to extend the value proposition of those tools so they can get at the value that Hadoop is uniquely positioned to deliver, right? Operational tools. Enterprise Hadoop platform, which I'll get into, needs to have operational tooling available in it. But ideally what you want to do is you also want to leverage existing skills and tools and have technologies like Microsoft System Center or Teradata or even OpenStack environments be able to get the benefit of the Hadoop bargain. So when you look at this architecture applied, you'll see that Hadoop really is able to be deployed across Linux, Windows, virtual environments, private cloud, public cloud, and even appliance footprints, and be integrated in a way that is very targeted to solving specific business needs, but in a way that sort of leverages existing skills, which I'll get into. And what we've seen particularly in just finishing out the point in the Tony Baer quote earlier, major vendors have embraced Hadoop as part of a holistic data architecture. And a question I often get asked is why? And if you take a step back, I think it makes sense, is these vendors have been delivering value into the data center for many years. And if they have the ability to extend the data under management, enable their tools and their solutions to derive value out of this new platform called Hadoop, then they're actually able to deliver a familiar experience through existing tools to their customers, but harness the power of Hadoop in the process. And an example of that today, for instance, is Hortonworks. We just had a release of the Hortonworks Data Platform 2.0 for Windows, right? That really unlocks arguably 70% of the x86 market on the Hadoop 2.0 line, right? So you get a consistent experience across Linux, Windows, Azure Cloud, Amazon Cloud, right? OpenStack clouds, Teradata appliances, etc., right? So the point here is getting a consistent experience integrated and enabling your trusted sources and folks like Microsoft, Teradata, SAP, HP, etc., to be able to integrate this in a way that benefits their customers and helps them drive more value into their ecosystems. That if we really reflect back and we look at 2011, the ecosystem has come a long way over the past, arguably 2013, but back in 2011, it was really just starting to get its legs under it. So the acceleration continues, which is pretty impressive. So that sets the context on where does Hadoop fit. And one of the things I like to demystify is I think Hadoop has a very strong role and it does things very well, but it fits into a more holistic architecture, right? So it's easy to get out ahead of our skis on, marketing it beyond maybe what the capabilities are in the platform. And one of the things you'll find, particularly folks at Hortonworks and others, as well as our partners, is we really want to make sure there's a pragmatic adoption path to this technology, because it will fundamentally change, the data center architecture as we move forward. And to Mike Walteri's point, is Hadoop's momentum is unstoppable as its open source roots grow wildly into enterprises. And it offers a unique approach to transforming how companies store, process, analyze, and share big data. So a question I often get asked is, how do I get started? What's the right path, right? How do I start my Hadoop journey? And really over the past 6, 12, and 18 months, a really clear path of adoption has emerged. And really the first step, particularly the companies that are successful in their deployments and aren't stuck in a science project realm of maybe a year just kicking the tires, not knowing what to do, the successful ones that move through POC, pilot, and into production quickly, start their adoption path focused on these new types of data that I covered: social, clickstream, sensor machine data, geolocation data, right? The raft of text, video, audio data that's available out there. And get a line of business driven application and unlocks opportunity from that new type of data, right? And that's usually where the journey starts, is around new analytic applications. And some of my colleagues jokingly refer to the adoption, the world is flat, so to speak, right, across industries, is while if you look at financial services, telecom, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, pharma, oil and gas, and government, they each have use cases that are unique to their sectors, right? But the common denominator really is when you look at it from the perspective of unlocking value from the new type of data, the patterns are horizontal, right? The technologies to enable those solutions are horizontal, right? And it fits really well into making sure the Enterprise Hadoop platform evolves to not only unlock things that are relevant to your business and your sector of the industry, but do so in a way that's very consistent, right? I use an example on this slide is, processing of sensor data is highly relevant to manufacturing, to healthcare, to oil and gas, right? There's very common patterns, right? And later on, I'll actually talk in the technology realm of technologies like Apache Storm that are coming into the Enterprise Hadoop ecosystem to really enable people to unlock, real-time analytics and visibility from the data as it's flowing through the pipe, as it's emitted from these sensors and machines. You have, clickstream analytics and social data. It's common across industries. Even in the healthcare industry, it's not on this slide, but we have customers who are using Twitter to better understand outbreaks that might be happening in their local area, so the hospital can get ahead of the curve and be more proactive in patient treatment, right? So the possibilities and the deployment patterns and the use cases being deployed have really accelerated over 2013 and really are crystallizing and rallying around this notion of new types of data, right? And, I would argue if we reflect back on the history of Hadoop, it started back in 2005, 2006 at Yahoo, right? And they wanted to make sure they improved their, the search engine that powered their business, right? And so in many cases they ingested the internet and they really improved their search capabilities. And then that expanded to advertising business. And then that expanded to email and advanced machine learning, to the point where Yahoo as a business powers their business. Every click that goes through the Yahoo web properties is able to be analyzed through a Hadoop platform on the back end. But if you think of their adoption path, it started off with 1 or 2 apps that were successful, and then more data and more applications came into the platform, and then ultimately grew into a modern data architecture that was deployed at scale, right, that enabled a wide range of use cases to flourish in a shared Hadoop service, or as many of our customers are referring to it as a data lake or a shared data lake, right? You could think of it conceptually as a Hadoop as a service platform where many applications can thrive and multiple data types can reside so you can unlock value out of that. And so, you know, what we've been seeing is really a pretty clear journey towards this notion of data lake. But, you know, pragmatically, you want to focus on, all right, I'm going to collect some sensor data or some server log data to drive operational excellence, right? And then I want to start collecting some clickstream data and, you know, mobile and various channel, you know, ways that my customers, you know, engage me from multiple channels, right? So web properties, mobile, even brick and mortar. So you can do customer intimacy and 360-degree view of the customer. And then you might dovetail both of those worlds to be able to detect fraud either at your infrastructure level on denial of service attacks or intrusion, as well as maybe fraud patterns that are happening through your web property, right? And so being able to cross-section and aggregate and join those two worlds, you get a much more enriched risk perspective for risk management type applications, as an example. And then ultimately you can unlock new opportunities for the business. But at the end of the day, this data lake notion provides an architectural shift. It provides Hadoop integrated in a broader architecture that enables you to deliver deep insight across this large and broad diverse set of new types of data, as well as being able to join it with some of your existing structured sources of data and unlock that value at scale, right, at petabyte and beyond scale. And that's really, over the past year or two, the state of the Hadoop market has been maturing to the point where these types of use cases are on the increase and will continue. We really expect that to increase. So if we double click on this notion of data lake, what does that really imply, right? What are some of the drivers of deploying a data lake at scale? So the first one is efficient scale and being able to have a robust platform, being able to store and process a wide range of data assets, right? Get it all in its original format, which, by the way, is useful for compliance purposes. So if you're able to store the original format of your data sources, that might be handy for just proving origin and or where the data was originally sourced from, as an example. Be able to store that in a platform cost-effectively at scale, all the way up through petabyte and beyond scale, right? So, Yahoo clusters and some of our larger customers, we're talking hundreds of petabytes at scale in Hadoop data lake architectures. But that's just one side of the coin, right? Being able to do efficient scale at cost structures that are 10x or 100x less than what you're paying today, right? And being able to uniquely derive value out of the new types of data. But it's really about unlocking broad insight, allowing simultaneous access by and timely insight by your end users, as well as new applications that are being built on that. And when I get into the technology section, we'll see why some of the innovations that have occurred in the Enterprise Hadoop technology space are important for unlocking this vision of shared data lake and a broad range of applications that give the right response time for the right use case, right? A key element that I want to poke on before I leave this slide is the beauty of the platform is you land data in its original format, and then you can begin to transform it into structure later. So you could, this schema on read notion is only apply structure as late as possible in your cycle. You don't have to design your schemas up front before you get the data in the platform and begin to figure out what value is inherent in that data. That's key because it enables you to be very agile as you're, as you're progressing on that journey towards a data lake. You want to unlock those things in a very agile, quick way, and having a platform that enables you to do that and apply structure when you need it, at the time you need it, is pretty critical. And so bringing it all back to the original modern data architecture notion is you have your sources of data. You have this notion of a shared data lake that's serving a wide range of analytics and custom and packaged applications. And it's really transforming the way that people can think about their data center architectures. And data center I use in quotes primarily because as we move forward, you're going to see on-premise data center, hosted, public cloud, as well as hybrid scenarios that become very increasingly important. So having an infrastructure that can operate across those domains is key. Right, so that's the backdrop, right? So where does Hadoop fit? How vibrant is the ecosystem? So really a lot of folks are leaning in. What's the adoption path look like, right? Where, what are the successful projects that are leveraging the technology in a very pragmatic way? What's their path to success? Now I'm going to talk a bit, spend really the rest of the time on Enterprise Hadoop technology directions. And this quote by Robin Bluer was reflective of the important innovations that occurred in 2013 that really set us up for, just an explosion of innovation that will continue on the technologies that were delivered in 2013. So Robin Bluer basically says with Hadoop 2, which is the new generation of Hadoop, we expect this ecosystem to grow like bamboo in springtime. Well, I kind of like that sentiment. So thanks, Robin, for the sentiment that I could factor into it. But basically, when we look at Enterprise Hadoop and this notion of being able to power applications that unlock value and a march towards a data lake notion, we really need to be very prescriptive, if you will. And the lens that we view investments in an Enterprise Hadoop platform are really three-pronged. One is the platform needs to have the key services, right, across core platform, operational, and data services that mainstream enterprises expect and require, all right? And so notions of scalable storage and efficient resource management and various processing paradigms and security and various ways that you can access the data in ways that are familiar with the right audience. Data movement technologies that get data in and out of the platform. Why? Because it's not a silo. It needs to integrate as part of the modern data architecture, as well as operational services that are baked in so you can manage your cluster at scale. You can actually manage the life cycle of data sets and age them out in disaster recovery scenarios and put that on a schedule so you can automate as much of that as possible. These are all notions of key services which I'll touch on in a bit. But let's not lose sight of the fact that there are two other vectors that are extremely important if Hadoop is going to take its rightful place in powering this next generation modern data architecture. And that's around how do you leverage existing skills, right, and provide a path for end users, whether they're developers, analysts, or operators, or even DevOps, right, to be able to interface with this platform in a way that's familiar, right, and that brings them along for the ride. And that's why the first section started on the ecosystem, because you see tools like Visual Studio.net, and it enables the whole .NET ecosystem to write applications that tap into the power of Hadoop, right? You see solutions from Teradata on a unified data architecture that integrates Hadoop tightly with the data warehouse architecture so you get a holistic approach, right? And you leverage existing investments, whether it's operational tools, analytic tools in the vast ecosystem of business intelligence, and frankly, the SQL area of millions of SQL developers that are out there. You need to make the platform relevant to the right people using the right tools. And then finally, and it's implicit in that, is you need to integrate it with many of the technologies that are in the data center today. Enterprises can't afford to throw out existing investments. They need to leverage them and get the benefits of both, right system for the right job, right? So this is really how we map in. That's sort of the way you should think about investments that are happening in the set of open source projects that I have outlined here, as well as others that are incubating and coming into the platform, which I'll cover shortly. But the point is this open source innovation can come in a way that provides the key services in a consumable way, but is able to tap into skills and be integrated in a way that's very familiar and be deployable, frankly, across Linux, Windows, cloud, appliance. Basically deploy it the way that you need to deploy it, but get a consistent experience, right? So then if you want to do some computations in the cloud and on-premise, you get a consistent level of services that are able to run in both places, right? You don't get a disjoint experience. And so let's spend the remainder really of the time talking about Hadoop 2, which landed in 2013, and some of the technologies that are relevant and landed in 2013 but are continuing their innovation through 2014 and beyond. And in particular, I'm going to spend some time on Yarn and Tez, which is an exciting new technology that sits on Yarn, and I'll get into that. That was part of what we've called the Stinger Initiative, which was really around enhancing Apache Hive and making it relevant for more SQL use cases. So from an end user's perspective, SQL is an important access point. But increasingly, real-time analytics and real-time stream processing is an important notion, and Apache Storm, when I cover that, is a sort of a new member of the broader Enterprise Hadoop landscape, and I'll cover a little bit of that. And then once you've landed all your data in the lake, so to speak, you need a way to manage the life cycle of that data at scale, and Apache Falcon is a good example of directionally where things are headed there. And then increasingly popular topic around security. I'll spend a little time on the state of security today and where it's headed, so people are familiar with that. And then I'll close out on some of the operational elements of the platform. But what I will encourage you to do is there are, and how I describe things is the open source innovation is happening across the projects. What we try to provide from Hortonworks' perspective is kind of the Star Trek universal translator, if you will, that's able to translate the innovation happening in the open source community, but describe it in a way that mainstream enterprises can understand why that innovation is relevant. Right? So if you go to the hortonworks.com/labs page, you'll see reflected a lot of the innovations that are underway in the community reflected in multi-phase roadmaps of investment, so you can understand where this technology is, where it's going, and why it's relevant from an enterprise perspective. So I encourage you to hit that page, because we'll increasingly continue to build out and be very open and public about the Enterprise Hadoop roadmap as it relates to a lot of these areas. But really to get started is, I think, and it's illustrative in Robin Bloor's notions of, Hadoop 2 really is really enabling an ecosystem to begin to flourish. And so it's really laid the foundation. And I would challenge folks, if you're thinking of Hadoop as really, that's just a batch-oriented MapReduce platform, then number one, you need to look at the second generation of Hadoop. It has landed in 2013 after 3.5+ years of development. And it transforms Hadoop from just a MapReduce platform on a scalable file system to be a multi-use data platform for batch, interactive, online, streaming, real-time scenarios. Why is that important? If you're going to bother having a path to data lake, as we've covered, storing all that data in one place, you want to interact with it in multiple ways and unlock value in ways that are relevant and as fast as they need to be for the use cases that you're trying to drive. And Hadoop 2 has really set the stage for a second generation of Hadoop innovation to flourish. So classic MapReduce still functions well, and as a matter of fact, it functions twice the performance that it did in the past. But there's an unlocking of interactive online and other engines that are coming into the fold so that you can drive online data applications or stream processing applications, etc. Needless to say, Yarn is a key component of enabling this vision. And simply, you can think of it as sort of the data operating system, if you will, for the Hadoop 2 generation. So MapReduce is just one of the data processing engines, but Apache Tez, which I'll cover in a second, is another one that's unlocking new performance characteristics and more flexible data processing. Technologies such as HBase and Accumulo are being worked on to ensure that their services are able to register and plug into Yarn so that no one workload can dominate the cluster and hog all the memory or CPU or what have you. The whole point of Yarn is to make sure all of these access patterns can coexist in a way where you have good cluster citizens across batch through real-time applications running in one consistent platform, getting value out of the data underneath. We will cover Apache Storm momentarily, but I just want to tease in sort of an area that's emerging around Apache Spark, which we are, from a Hortonworks perspective, we find exciting in a couple of dimensions. And one is around in-memory machine learning and iterative analytics, and providing an in-memory sandbox way of doing that very effectively. And ensuring the Spark workloads can coexist in a broader Enterprise Hadoop platform just makes a lot of sense. And you'll see us continue to describe out our public roadmap as Spark starts its journey coming in 2014 in the platform. And then there's a whole raft of open source and commercial solutions. You know, even commercial solutions from the folks like Talend and others. So this isn't just about open source innovation, folks. This is about that ecosystem we talked about, optimizing their data processing engines, their in-memory analytics, their tools to be able to run natively in Hadoop to get the benefit of the bargain, right? So one of the the newer members of the fold was a project called Apache Tez that was incubated earlier in 2013. And you can think of it as a modern and more efficient alternative to MapReduce built on Yarn. And so the Hive box here is highlighted in yellow because I'm going to talk about Hive next. And the genesis of Tez really was part of the Stinger initiative, which I'll cover shortly. But Tez's power is not just for Hive. And one of the things that's just sort of a precursor to that is Hive has sort of gotten beat up on the fact that it's, built on the MapReduce paradigm. And sort of the Stinger initiative introduced this Tez notion to actually alleviate that constraint and unlock interactive queries that are just phenomenally faster than the classic MapReduce queries. And the point here is that same value is now available to the broader ecosystem. We're seeing Apache Pig start to build on Tez, Cascading building on Tez, and the broader open source and commercial ecosystem starting to form. So in 2014, if 2013 was the year of Yarn, Tez is going to be an important piece in 2014 as the ecosystem begins to integrate either natively into Yarn or building on Tez, as an example. And so speaking of building on Tez, it's just one facet of sort of the broader approach to SQL, right? And so the notion of SQL in Hadoop or on Hadoop has been very popular for the past year and a half, right? And if we look at the landscape, Apache Hive has been the de facto standard for Hadoop access, Hadoop SQL access. In particular, it's able to do batch and non-interactive SQL for many years at petabyte scale, right? So terabyte and petabyte scale. And so the Stinger initiative, one of the prongs was to improve Hive's performance 100x. So its use cases can extend into the human interactive SQL realm to enable rapid insight over big data. Why is this important is the way the community has gone about it, and I'll cover some of the speed, scale, and SQL details, but it enables the existing investments in Apache Hive, and Hive has been around since 2008, to continue to move forward and be relevant for a wider swath of use cases. So you can do both batch and interactive workloads in a single system using a standard SQL dialect, which, by the way, has gotten a lot more robust. And so that preserves the Hive-based solutions that are out there, not only for customer investments who are just, using the newer versions of Hive and getting performance benefits, but the vendor ecosystem whose business intelligence tools have just gotten markedly faster and more robust, right? So if we look at the speed progress that's been made, Hive 10 on this chart represents Hive before the Stinger initiative started about a year ago, right? And this is not just a Hortonworks initiative. This is Hortonworks, Microsoft, SAP, Facebook, and a broader community of, across 30+ organizations. And even in just the, the last release of Hive, 150,000 lines of new code is poured into the infrastructure as part of this Stinger initiative. And so Hive 0.11 landed in May of 2013. Hive 12 landed in September, October timeframe. And the next phase of the Stinger initiative and the next wave of Hive begins to sit on top of Tez. And you can look at the performance benefits that we're seeing, particularly in the early releases. 1,400 seconds for pricing analytics using star schema join down to 7.2 seconds, etc. But speed is just one element of the equation. Scale on efficient storage in the cluster using the modern ORC file, the optimized RC file that was introduced in Apache Hive 11, enables a higher compression rate, but also for data to more directly map into the memory space of Hive, a la vectorized queries, much faster, taking advantage of some of the modern compute and memory architectures. So we're pretty bullish on the orc file really enabling more data to fit into a Hadoop platform at scale and help sustain query times over petabyte scale queries. And then finally, I had mentioned the SQL. There's been a lot of activity in Hive in just really extending its SQL compliance. And I could spend a ton of time on this slide. Why is this important? There's millions of people with SQL skills, number one. There are tools in the ecosystem, business intelligence and tools and others, that as well as other data systems, that if you don't have the common set of data types, you get an impedance mismatch if you're sharing data in and out of Hadoop into other systems, right? So you want to make sure you round out the data types so there's no lack of fidelity as data flows through the system. And then you need to unlock familiar queries in the system. So a lot more there. I encourage you to kind of take a look at what's happening in the Stinger work. I know there were previews that were posted before the end of the year, and a lot of the fruits of the next labor will be coming up in the Hortonworks data platform release this quarter. So transitioning, in this data services realm, SQL is key, but it is not the only workload that Hadoop needs to serve. Again, data lake is you want to apply schema sort of as late as possible. You want to be able to process sensor and machine data as it's flowing into the system. And so we're pretty excited about bringing in Apache Storm into the Enterprise Hadoop space. We actually had a preview release before the new year that got some early builds of Storm so people could begin to use it, in the context of Hadoop. But for those folks who are looking at what many folks refer to as the Lambda architecture, which blends real-time, on-the-fly analytics with deep, multi-year batch analytics in a cohesive architecture, in a modern data architecture, Storm plays a key role in that Lambda architecture. The technology was created by engineers at Twitter. It has been in the open source space for a few years and actually, got a strong following from an open source perspective. But they joined, and the project joined the Apache Software Foundation in 2013. And so our engineers are participating as part of that community with this multi-phase roadmap of investment of bringing Storm in as a first-class citizen. So it can be provisioned and managed by Ambari, and you get a consistent operational experience, et cetera, right? So again, it's building, real-time applications in that notion of data lake, and being able to have that coexist in the platform a la Yarn is really a key vision as the Enterprise Hadoop platform matures over 2014 and beyond. So that covers some of the sort of the data services. Let me sort of transition into some of the operational security and management realms. Apache Falcon was a project that was introduced earlier in 2013, And really, the way you need to think about Falcon is it's a framework to be able to create and implement reusable workflows for data sets to orchestrate their data movement, data lineage, disaster recovery, replication scenarios, set retention policy. So this broader notion of data lifecycle management and being able to orchestrate that in an automated fashion. Falcon plays sort of a critical framework role in that regard. So acquisition and processing of data and making sure that if a step in the process fails, that it gets restarted and you're able to continue and operate it at scale. Falcon provides some very strong technologies that were contributed to the Apache Software Foundation by InMobi, who's a mobile advertising company. And they've been using Falcon at scale in production for the past year plus, bringing that to the more mainstream enterprises and being able to unlock some of these data retention scenarios that are going to be important as people want to manage the lifecycle of their data is key, and Falcon plays a key role there. One of the interesting use cases in there is being able to sort of redirect and encrypt and decrypt sort of on demand in this notion of data lakes. And that sort of transitions our conversation into sort of the Enterprise Hadoop security realm, right? So security is clearly going to increase in importance in 2014, but it's important to have a level set in that, at Hortonworks we have 240 plus customers, and that is increasing at a very rapid pace. People are deploying Hadoop at scale in a secured fashion, right? So authentication and authorization and audit and data protection vectors. There are capabilities in the platform that have existed, that have been built up over time, have come in 2013, that exist today, whether it's the base level Kerberos or wire encryption or access control lists or permissions, etc. There's a baseline across the Hadoop platform as well as the ecosystem of tools that plug in. With that said, the work is not done, right? There's more work to be done on this notion. So as new data services come in, you want to make sure they plug in with a consistent security model, etc. So it's great we have widespread innovation, but we're increasingly going to have to be more prescriptive and make sure that we think of security as a first-class notion as new services begin to plug in, right? And so making sure that authentication and authorization and data protection are addressed holistically. And so there's a whole roadmap that we Hortonworks sort of talk about, and there are others in the ecosystem like Intel and others who are investing in security. There's a lot of really cool innovation that's happening in the security space and important work that's happening. Some things that I'll draw your eye to for the sake of this conversation is we talked about Apache Hive and enabling SQL. There's work from a security perspective that's continuing to happen around Hive, around pluggable authentication module support for Hive, SSL support for Hive Server 2, but even more interestingly, standard SQL-style authorization in SQL Grant and SQL Revoke for Hive. So people who are familiar when using Grant and Revoke in relational databases, they'll be able to do that kind of semantics in the Hive scenario as sort of the first-class secured SQL access realm. And then the other one I'll mention is Apache Knox. And you could think of that as it's effectively, instead of opening up firewalls across all of your nodes in your cluster, it provides a central choke point, if you will, that you can provide perimeter security and apply security in one place in a consistent way. That was a tech preview before the holidays, rolling itself into the upcoming Hortonworks data platform, but a lot of really solid work happening in the community in Knox and other security areas. So rounding out the operational experience, Apache Ambari has been around for a couple of years. It's the only 100% open source framework for provisioning, managing, and monitoring Hadoop clusters at scale. It has a robust, modern web user interface for people who want to use that as their primary dashboard. But as important, It has a robust set of REST APIs that were influenced heavily by the likes of Microsoft and Teradata, and even the work that's happening in the OpenStack community around Project Savannah for deploying elastic Hadoop clusters at scale. They leverage the REST APIs so Ambari can orchestrate the management tasks, right? But the user interface or the experience can be through the pane of glass that's relevant to them. And there's DevOps who just want to script against the REST APIs, have a way to use familiar tools, even outside of the UI, which is important. So a lot of innovation work that's been happening in Ambari. Two areas that I encourage you to spend a little time to research, and I'm pretty excited about directionally, is the notion of Ambari stacks and Ambari views, right? So Ambari stacks means no longer does Ambari have to have intimate knowledge of the services that it manages. You're able to create a blueprint, if you will, of third-party services as well as others and create your own stacks and enable those stacks to be provisioned and deployed by Ambari, right? So this notion of multiple engines plugging in, well, you need an extensible architecture to do that, and stacks is shooting in that direction. And then if you want a user interface for that experience, you should be able to plug in a view into Ambari Web that is centrally secured, so you have role-based access to the views for the right people who are allowed to do the right tasks and a consistent experience. I'm very excited about where the Ambari ecosystem is heading. Hortonworks, Red Hat, HP, and others are spending time in the Ambari space, so there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipe. So from a recap, I think we've covered a lot of ground in sort of the state of the union, if you will. Hopefully, Hadoop's role and the ecosystems rallying around Hadoop, Hadoop's role is becoming clear. Major vendors have recognized its role and are actively integrating it into their solutions, right? System integrators have practices focused on not only Hadoop, but modern data architectures that get the benefit of the Hadoop bargain. There's an adoption path that's very consistent. Start with targeted apps around these new types of data and then grow it and let success drive you towards a modern data architecture and data lake. Open source innovation, we covered a lot of new incubated projects that happened in 2013. Apache Tez, Storm, Spark, and others are joining the fold in 2014, and I'm actually eager to see what net new projects emerge in the Apache Software Foundation. It's a rapid pace, and we expect it to continue. So with that, we covered a lot of ground. How do you get started? How do you digest a lot that's been covered? I encourage you to go download the Hortonworks Sandbox. It's a learning environment. It has tutorials that focus on the new types of data. It helps educate you on some of these important moving parts. It integrates with many of your tools today. Our partners have tutorials that help guide you through using Hadoop with their technologies. That's the best way to get started. And then get involved, join the community. Come join us in Amsterdam, where the tulips will be in bloom, or come join us in San Jose. And if you have interesting use cases or you're working in that space, call for papers is open, so get your abstracts in now. So we covered a lot of ground. Let's open it up. I know we're running maybe a few minutes over, but
So we'll just jump right into a couple questions. Sean, there's some great questions in the QA. Everybody, please do feel free to ask add-on questions or anything you're thinking about in the QA session. We have a great set of questions here. I'm going to combine a couple of them. One of them's from Ravi and Al on the line. As Hadoop gains adoption in the enterprise, Sean, how important is disaster recovery, and what are some of the disaster recoveries for Hadoop? Not just as a single analytical application, but when you talk about the MDA and kind of as we grow in size and data centers and all these different things, can you just address that disaster recovery in a broad adoption?
Sure. Just by way of context, back in 2002 to 2004, I was actually at a company called Princeton SoftTech Database Archiving, and it's IBM's Optum archiving line. And so I'm familiar with the data lifecycle management, disaster recovery, and those types of things. And those areas arguably are going under change, right? Because when you're talking about data lakes that are petabyte scale, just picking that up and replicating that, it just defies the laws of physics. Your network's bandwidth is just not feasible. And so that's why we see technologies like Falcon, where you're able to basically lasso sets of data and say, here's the policy I want to apply this data, and I want to be able to replicate that over to another cluster that will ensure that data is spread out across data centers or globally, or arguably, ultimately, maybe even in cloud stores or offline stores, right? So I think this area of disaster recovery, the capabilities are coming in the open source, but I think particularly the deployment models across cloud and on-prem are intriguing as to how disaster recovery will go, right? So there's definitely a lot more innovation ahead of us. It is a key area for enterprise adoption, but thinking you can do it the old way where you might go out to tape, again, you want to rethink that architecture and make sure you're very prescriptive around how you want to manage sets of data, right, and apply policy around those data sets.
And there's tools building around that, like some of the stuff that our partner WANDisco does, and
exactly.
all that kind of stuff is really important in that environment as well.
Exactly. The broader ecosystem is actually bringing solutions to bear that really plug in. Even in the security realm, right, there's a lot of encryption technologies and others that are available in the broader ecosystem. So I think the Enterprise Hadoop community needs to innovate, but also the vendor ecosystem is making their technologies relevant and applicable in the Hadoop context.
Absolutely. So Sean, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a softball. I'm going to see if you and I are thinking the same way here. But there's a question here. It's really, how do I get started? And we talked about the Sandbox at the end of the event. I think it's a great way to get started, to get your hands dirty with Hadoop. But the question's coming from a data architect who has a lot of experience with data warehousing tools. How do they get started? Right? They have existing stuff and everything.
Yeah, so I think we see that as a common area, particularly the role of data warehouses in these new forms of data. I think there's a variety of sort of on-ramps and access paths. I do think that from a database administrator perspective, getting familiar with Hadoop and how it manages its data, while it's different than, it's not really a relational database under the hood, the blocking and tackling of how you think about how you want to manage that data is quite similar. From a SQL skills perspective, again, how things interface on top of that, Hive and as well as things like Excel and others tend to be a way for people to sort of tap into that and begin to get familiar with that. We are also seeing particularly unique ways of modernizing the approach to ETL, right? And that tends to be a way where you're able to refine data and then get it in a more structured and consumable format in your data warehouse. And so those data flows where you really do, Hadoop is the pre-processing and then flow it into your data warehouse is another way that people tend to get started. And there's some very real cost savings and, that can maybe fund some other projects that we see.
Cool. And Sean, again, I'm going to kind of compile a couple of questions together. We only have time for really one, maybe two, but lots of questions here about, performance in Hive and benchmarks and, concurrent queries and across the board. Can you just kind of generally address, our approach to benchmarking? I don't need to go through the numbers again, but kind of, when will we produce benchmark results in terms of performance? I think, again, Scale and Semantics are really key to that, but can you address kind of our approach and how we roll that out and what's available today?
Sure. So, particularly if you go on the Stinger page on Hortonworks, you'll kind of see where things stand, right? So labs, Hortonworks.com labs, Stinger, right? And basically out there, our focus is on enabling Hive to do batch, non-interactive, interactive workloads in the same system, right? And we're using TPC benchmarking, in order to do that. We actually publish the test harnesses that we have, and you can get access to those very easily and publicly. We're not overly interested in sort of the, Housewives of New Jersey smackdown performance benchmarks. What we're interested in is making sure we move the needle in very significant ways for people that need performance improvements. And so it's publicly disclosing how we go about testing that and putting that out there so people can benchmark it in their environments, we feel is the right way to go about this. And so, we'll let the technology speak for itself as it improves over time.
Cool.
And that's just indicative of the open source model. I think we need to be public about how we do this stuff, right?
Okay, Sudoku.
Yeah, right, there you go.
So one last question, Sean, before we go. It's kind of a little bit of a directional point here. And so, do we have any plans, does Hortonworks have any plans to put, search engine in HDP, natively in HDP, either Solr or Elasticsearch, whatnot?
Sure. So our approach to that, and again, we have a two-pronged strategy, is what technologies in open source should come in an organized way, and then from a vendor ecosystem perspective, how do we enable Elasticsearch and Lucidworks to have a deep experience in Hadoop clusters, primarily because we're seeing a lot of that technology being deployed in enterprises. So right now, we want to make sure that we enable a best-of-breed solution there and really focus on Yarn, Tez, enabling a broad ecosystem, and try and avoid sort of competing with the ecosystem and enable it broadly. We're really focused on the platform. So.
That's awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Sean. So everybody, thank you for taking the time today. We did have a whole bunch of questions. We got through a lot of them. I kind of compiled a couple of them together, but those that we didn't get to, we'll make sure to get answers out to everybody. If you have any further questions, please feel free. I think it's webinar@hortonworks.com. If you have any follow-on questions, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Lots of questions about the PowerPoint. If the recording is going to be available, we'll absolutely make that available off the website. Again, and any kind of future direction stuff, really, the hortonworks.com/labs it's such a great place to look for future direction, not just with Hortonworks. I mean, we do work within the open community. It shows where we're kind of focusing within all those Apache projects. So I think it's a great place to go for further information. So,
just the final comment is I request that you join the herd at Hadoop Summit. Whether it's Amsterdam or San Jose or what have you, it's a great way, because I know we saw some, who are the customers. Go out to the use cases on our website. You'll see the raft of customers across verticals. But more importantly, if you can go rub elbows with them at a technology event that's focused on emerging technologies, how people are getting pragmatic value, how the broad major players are integrating with it, right, SAP, HP, et cetera, you'll learn a lot at these events. They're very, very interactive. So, come join us. Amsterdam's a great city, and San Jose is fantastic as well. Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, everybody.